The following analysis of killer7 does contain spoilers for the main plot of the game. There are also discussions of violence, racism, sexual violence and abuse, and pedophilia within this analysis that may be triggering. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's me. So, you there yet?
You mean this shithole?
That's where they all hang out. Our information tells us that there's 14 of them.
And they're all fun.
Keep one alive so we can ask who the boss is.
Anything else I should know?
Nah, not really. You'll know when you see them, they're, different.
Will do.
Well, may the Lord smile.
And the devil have mercy.
You don't want to go any further. It's dangerous. My friends are all dead. They were all murdered by people that look like this. I have been chosen.
Oh, shit. There's more than 14. Those bastards are breeding.
The turn of the 21st century was a moment that should have been the fantastical future decades prior wished for. But instead, it was a realization that the problems of 1999 would still be the problems of 2000. Class divide, racism, discrimination, war, and general conflict both domestically and internationally still existed despite the leaps in technology and culture. It felt like the world was almost expecting not to make it past 1999 at all, evident within Y2K and the fiction and media before the 21st century, such as the Terminator franchise, The Matrix, and even in terms of gaming, such as Chrono Trigger having its antagonist Lavos destroy the world in 1999 AD. Yet, the world kept spinning, and the aftermath of the turn of the century was just a continuation of its flaws. No more is this represented in modern history than 9/11, arguably the single most consequential event in history within the 21st century. American mourning and outrage led to the infamous War on Terror, whose impact the world, especially the Middle East, is still feeling over a decade later to this second. A war that, while having massive support at the time, has been looked at unfavorably as the years go on. Even back in 2001, the writing was on the wall regarding how the war would go, with Ivo H. Dodler and James M. Lindsay noting via commentary in December that year, quote, "The campaign against terrorism is instead much more like the Cold War of the past century. Like the fight against Soviet communism, today's campaign against terrorism is likely to be nasty, brutish, and long. Because of the diverse nature of the threat, the United States has no clear vision of when or how the war will end," end quote. That brutality extends beyond the conflict, however. Air travel, oil, foreign relations, and domestic relations between the Middle East and the Western world are victims of this, even for those who are residents of the West. Reflecting on this radicalization, Tahir Abbas adds, quote, "The war on terror continues to exist even in the nomenclature has shifted. However, the emergence of the far right in the last few years has now become normalized in the countering violent extremism movement. The prognosis is that the war on terror will continue to remain in all but name. Concerns to do with radicalization and violent extremism will continue to remain important not because they are a problem of religion, because they are often a problem of structural disadvantage and inequality," end quote. As noted above though, these issues and aspects didn't just appear with 9/11. They were issues that were present before the turn of the century, and 9/11 was merely a catalyst for them to continue in many ways. Similar to the fear of the world ending influencing fiction and media, so too did the war on terror and its continuing escalation. Islamophobia became apparent in movies and television far greater than before, with examples such as the television show 24, the films American Sniper, The Hurt Locker, and even video games such as Call of Duty. These reflections through fiction vary from either continuing the cultural Islamophobia present within Western culture or trying to go against those stereotypes. This extended far beyond just Islamophobia, however, as the continued paranoia and struggles within the Cold War, though dying down, still existed between countries such as the United States, the UK, China, North Korea, and Russia, for example. Within the midst of these cultural conflicts and issues, one relationship between East and West is one that would arguably be the most defining in terms of art, fiction, and culture, especially among the youth: the United States and Japan. Amidst the aftermath of World War II and the use of the atomic bomb, the influx of influential and impactful anime, film, and games will become a focal point within American culture and vice versa, to the point where works such as Dragon Ball, Metal Gear, Pokemon, and many more have influenced Western art in a way very few other cultures have in the 21st century. Discussing the relationship between the two countries in 2018, writer Matt Out notes that, quote, "In recent years, American culture has increasingly been following a playbook made in Japan," end quote. Not just referring to this culture, but even in less appealing aspects such as fertility rates, economic stagnation, youth focused on postponing adulthood, and uncertainty. It is that current relationship between the two countries, their past, and the consequences of World War II, on top of the turbulent relations between East and West, as well as the issue of terrorism, that Goichi Suda, aka Suda51, and Shinji Mikami's 2005 cult classic Killer7 directly situates itself within. Taking place in an alternative history, the game focuses on the titular Killer7, a group of 7 assassins led by the enigmatic Harmon Smith against an ever-growing threat in the form of heaven spirals, monsters that commit atrocities via suicide bombing. When the game initially launched that year for the GameCube, it received polarizing views for its narrative, style, gameplay, and violence, even garnering attention from Jack Thompson in his campaign against video games. 20 years later, while the narrative of Killer7 was already appreciated and analyzed for the aspects mentioned above, these aspects, like the best works of art, hit harder and feel arguably even more relevant than they were in 2005, painting a picture of how cyclical and inevitable terrorism in the modern world is.
July 3, 1998, the day that all international disputes were resolved. This day marked the beginning of true peace for the entire world, for people of all races. The four powers quickly formed anti-terrorist organizations and set out creating peacekeeping agencies to bring order and security on a global scale. The world unified to do everything in its power to eradicate all the weeds of evil and disorder. The international society, under the motto of protecting the world from international terrorism, ideology terrorism, and cyber terrorism, stopped all air transportation and closed every network station in a short span of 2 years to reduce the likelihood of terrorism. The world had changed. In the year 2002, a network of intercontinental expressways bridging the Atlantic Ocean opened, connecting the two major sides of the world. In the following year of 2003, the construction of a mass-scale distribution system began, and a man-made landmass as large as a city was built over an ocean. The use and research of nuclear energy was banned, and all radioactive waste and materials were disposed of at an energy disposal facility in the Gibsoft Islands, a remote set of islands off the coast of the Indian Ocean. Now, international eyes were on the elimination of the intercontinental missiles that posed the biggest threat to world peace. In order to eliminate these weapons of mass destruction, they were launched outside the Earth's atmosphere and intercepted by other missiles, exploding them on contact. People around the world watched these explosions light up the sky as if they were some kind of dazzling light show. These explosions, later known as the missile shows, became the symbol of world peace. The world was filled with hope. But a new threat was on the rise. At the signing ceremony of the UN's World Security Treaty in the year 2003, a new breed of terrorists who called themselves Smiling Faces attacked the ceremony. The devastating attack caught the international society by surprise and temporarily crippled key operations in the United Nations. That assault was aimed at nothing other than using terrorism to create terror. Fear spread throughout the nations like wildfire. There was nothing the police or the military could do to counter the Smiling Faces. The only ones who had any chance of stopping these Smiling Faces were the omniscient and almost godlike professional assassins. The key players behind the scenes of the four powers utilized their connections and called upon the group known as killer7. Their only hope rested with them.
The world of killer7's history is defined by its declaration of peace on July 3, 1998. Amidst fears of terrorism going into the 21st century, the superpowers of the world declared peace, resulting in nuclear weapons being disposed of, network communications and air travel being banned, and intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, being launched into the outer atmosphere, the fireworks being the symbol of peace. These aspects were integrated into this world building due to them being the biggest aspects that are related to modern day terrorism. Nuclear weaponry is the express reason the United States sees Iran as a threat, Plain terror is obviously linked to 9/11, and as noted on the FBI's own page, quote, international and domestic violent extremists have developed an extensive presence on the internet through messaging platforms and online images, videos, and publications. These facilitate the group's ability to radicalize and recruit individuals who are receptive to extremist messaging. End quote. However, the internet and air travel are notable beyond this because they were at the focal point of Shooter 51's prior games, The Silver Case, and Flower, Sun, and Rain. These prior games and killer7 serve to formulate Kill the Past, the overarching multiverse that Shooter's games have inhabited all the way to some extent to his latest project, Romeo is a Dead Man, with the topic of killing the past discussed later. Both of these projects are similar in tone to killer7, as they directly use Shooter's style to discuss aspects of violence, crime, and terrorism. In the case of the Silver Case, the internet and its usage within the plot becomes a focal point of the culture revolving around the murders the protagonists are investigating and the central figure of the plot, Kamui Uehara. While for the large majority of the plot, Uehara is catatonic, his initial killing spree and how the plot continually unfolds results in an internet phenomenon. Flower, Sun, and Rain, though not directly dealing with crime in the way the Silver Case does, situates itself in a paradise island known as Los Pass Island that has its protagonist, Sumio Mondo, trying to stop the bombing of an airplane, only to be increasingly distracted by the rest of the happenings on the island. In contrast to the Silver Case, Flower, Sun, and Rain sets up an idealistic paradise only for the truth of Lost Pass to show that paradise in the real world is nothing more than a lie, forcing Sumio to come to terms with not only the truth of the island, but himself. The obvious differences between the prior games and killer7 is noted by the lack of air travel and internet, and with these exclusions a point is made, because despite the absence of the elements of society, and even the removal of nuclear weapons, in 2003, the Heaven Smiles attack a meeting of the United Nations, resulting in terrorism finally hitting the new millennium. There was no stopping terrorism from occurring, no matter how many attempts were made in the veil of peace, only delaying the inevitable. Heaven Smiles were merely an adaptation towards these changes, shown in how they attack society, blending in amongst the civilians and naked to the normal eye, is the killer7 must use a vision ring to see them. That notion of terrorists being embedded within society was a common fear post 9/11, with Vice President of the United States Dick Cheney even believing suicide bombings would happen in America as well back as in 2002. This, of course, led to even more rampant Islamophobia, counter-terrorist operations, and fear among society at large. All of these fears of terrorism disrupting utopia are subverted near instantaneously, however, in the actual chapter of Sunset, revealing much of the inherent reason that the United States has become a target for Heaven Smiles. With an imminent missile attack from an unknown party set to destroy Japan entirely, the chapter focuses on whether or not the United States should even intervene at all, and the ultimate decision not to results in the country being wiped off the map. Narratively, the Japanese government had become more of a problem than an ally for the United States, and the US government was beginning to see them as ultimately expendable. As noted by Travis, a remnant psyche of a former assassination job that killer7 completed, a result of the real-life Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings instilling fear among the Japanese about nuclear devastation, a fear that is commonly dissected and discussed in numerous forms of fiction, most famously the Godzilla franchise. More importantly, however, it is in reference to the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan, or ANPO. The treaty effectively permitted the presence of U.S. bases on Japanese soil, the commitment to defend one another, and a military alliance between the two countries. A revision of the treaty and occupation of Japan by U.S. forces post-World War II, the agreement has linked the two countries together with a notable controversial effect. Around the time of the treaty being ratified, massive protests occurred with a desire for the U.S.-Japanese relations to be dismissed completely. Documenting these reasons, Associate Professor Hiroya Saruya of Sophia University notes, quote, "One of the most important factors fueling the 1960 ANPO struggle was people's strong feeling that we never wanted to be involved in a war again. When the Japanese government started negotiation talks with the United States for the revision of the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty in 1957, the Japanese economy was finally rebounding after the massive destruction of World War II, and social conditions were also being stabilized. People feared that Japan could possibly be involved in war again if the treaty was revised, and that eventually led to the large-scale protests and strikes. At the peak of the protests, according to one source, over 5 million workers took part in collective actions, such as rallies and demonstrations, during their work hours." End quote. Despite these massive protests, the treaty was indeed ratified, and though many Japanese people have warmed up to the ratification, some, especially in the Okinawa region, still object to the treaty. And the ensuing disagreements among Japanese students who were in college and graduates even resulted in splintering the student movement, paving the way for the New Left movement that was far more radical. That division is central to the plot of Sunset as a chapter, with the other notable revelation being that Japan itself is divided regarding its destruction, as the UN Party, not to be confused with the actual United Nations, and the Liberal Party's disagreements over the future of Japan result in its destruction. Such a division in relation to the United States is also shown within the regions within the Middle East, with the countries' alliances towards certain regions causing even more distress. A prime example of this would be the initial alliance with the Afghan Mujahideen via the CIA, which armed and financed the militant groups in Operation Cyclone. That relationship prior to 9/11 was even a focal point of media, such as the third Rambo film, and scholars have even argued that the relationship and funding of the group was a notable reason for 9/11 to have occurred. Speaking directly on this blowback, Chalmers Johnson notes, quote, "The attacks of September 11th descend in a direct line from events in 1979, the year in which the CIA, with full presidential authority, began carrying out its largest ever clandestine operation, the secret arming of Afghan freedom fighters, Mujahideen, to wage a proxy war against the Soviet Union, which involved the recruitment and training of militants from all over the Islamic world. Various members of the current Bush cabinet were complicit in generating the blowback of 9/11, end quote. With both the Middle East and Japan in comparison, the actions the U.S. takes in Sunset make it clear why Heaven Smiles exists within the world beyond just genuine terror, as well as why the survivors of Japan's destruction plot in the following years to attack the U.S. in revenge. World peace, as the game describes it, is a pure facade, with the reality being that the superpowers of the West, the U.S. specifically, hold all the keys in terms of supremacy and imperialism, able to allow or cause the destruction of nations, or allow said destruction to happen should these nations pose a threat to the U.S. or no longer be seen as worthy allies. Like the terrorist attacks of reality, these events are a direct blowback to decisions made by the U.S. and its destructive power. Harmon Smith, the leader of the killer7, is perhaps the most blatant representation of this within the game, as in contrast to Cloudman's God Hand of Creation linked to the East, Harmon, linked to the West, holds the power of the God Killer. That isn't to say Japan is wholly exempt from critique within the narrative either, and the UN Party and Liberal Party's disagreement resulting in the destruction of Japan are proof of this critique. In contrast to the Liberal Party, the UN Party is notably conservative, focused on the preservation of the Japanese nationalism and the idea that the world will be united under the nation of Japan. Such a sentiment is the focus of numerous Japanese political parties, such as Nippon Kaigi and the Conservative Party of Japan. That sense of ultranationalism is understandably controversial, especially among the Asian neighbors of Japan that suffered under their regime during the Second World War, dubbed by the Japanese media at the time the Spirit of Japan. Noted by Charles T. Perez, Jorge Cole, Elena Achegueda, Daniela Grios, and Rafael Blandino in their research on militaristic ultranationalism in the country during this time, quote, "Radical Japanese nationalists had visions of a militaristic empire and carried out assassinations when they felt that a choice made by someone in power weakened the Japanese state," end quote. These drastic measures are shown directly within the game, with the UN Party being directly linked to Cloudman, as well as the numerous cultural and military attacks the party takes upon the world post-sunset, such as the assassination of Liberal Party member Hiro Kasai, the spreading of the mythical documents known as the Yakumo, and the eventual plan of counterattack towards the US at the end of the game. Despite this theme of retribution, however, it's clear that the people who suffer the most are the Japanese public. The notion of the Japanese civilians suffering the most from their country's political decisions is obvious within the context of World War II, but still feels relevant today, especially in the wake of the Fukushima crisis, for example. Detailing the incident in an analysis of Shin Godzilla, Robert Rath notes, quote, "When bureaucrats from the Prime Minister's office discovered that radiation plumes had spread beyond the evacuation zone, they hid the data to save face and avoid the political cost of resettling massive amounts of people in the land-scarce Tokyo area. Everyone, from TEPCO employees, 90% of whom ran from the complex, to the Prime Minister Khan's office were in total disarray. When Khan asked his key nuclear safety advisor what to do, he discovered the man had an economics degree and knew nothing about physics. Unbeknownst to the public, the government came close, very, very close, to evacuating Tokyo," end quote. Within the Sunset chapter, it's shown how similar bureaucracy destroys all hope of saving Japan, such as the conflict between the different parties, as well as the notable Mahjong scene, a blatant representation of how the lives of millions are seen as a game to those in power.
What can you do when the whole world has its eyes on you?
Almost everything. Destroying one or two nations? It's an easy task here. The promise made 30 years ago wasn't a guarantee. It was only the beginning of a countdown. Look at them. They're heading toward hell.
What's sad is that we've gotten used to this. I mean, our senses. That's pathetic.
That doesn't necessarily mean that we're not human.
Okay, now you're not helping.
The name's Andre Almeida. I am a man with a plan. The people will come to me for salvation. I have a hunch that something's gonna happen. Take this Stacy concert going on right here. Something very bad is gonna happen here. You ever met the kind of people that come to these Stacy concerts? These dudes have got energy to spare. We're talking guys who beat off 4 times a day. This is an epicenter of energy, man. But this Stacy they love, she's an illusion. But in the new age, there's no fooling them, no sir. They won't be tricked by illusions anymore. Oh my God, I can't hold back. Oh God, I'm coming. Yeah! Woo! See, I told you, this is real. Now, Mr. Garcia and Smith, I'm challenging you. I've created a new faith. I want you to find me. I'm waiting for you. So what do you say? If you don't find me, I won't have meaning. So I'll be waiting for you.
While the game sets the tone for its opinion on international terrorism and the regions off the bat, the latter chapters of Killer7 delve deep into the fears of domestic terrorism as well as the connections to the flaws of the state. Cloudman, focused on Andre Almeida, deals directly with a seemingly utopian society interrupted by both the appearance of heaven smiles and the eventual arrival of the US military. Almeida's role as a revolutionary that predicts the concert bombing in the beginning of the chapter, as well as his preacher-like faith in the resulting zealotry, are clear parallels to African-American revolutionaries such as Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King Jr., the latter being an actual preacher of Christian faith. His decision to build an entire town also mirrors the real-world attempts at black societies within the United States, such as Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example. Another connection is also shown in his Brazilian roots, with James Clinton Howell in his analysis of the game linking Almeida's background to the internment camp in Crystal City, Texas during World War II, which housed Japanese and German Latin Americans. This meaning that Almeida was possibly descended from said Latin Americans, linking back to the World War II thesis, as well as explaining how he can use the Yakumo. That sense of spirituality is also apparent in the fact that Almeida is a bastardization of the surname Almeida, as Howell points out, which links to Catholicism. Quote, "The connection suggests that Almeida was a deliberate decision to link Andre with Catholic piety, and not the easy kind either. As Almeida infected himself with various lethal diseases, John Almeida inflicted great pain upon his body to learn to endure suffering. He wore hair shirts, iron chains, and even wore metal plates with sharp points piercing his flesh." End quote. All of these aspects of his character represent him as a true revolutionary, almost a god living among men, only for the US involvement to destroy this godhood, revealing that the entire town was a part of a counter-terrorism operation with the US personnel on site infecting Almeida with the Heaven Smile strain in an attempt to find a cure.
I'm General Lynch from the United States Emergency Countermeasure Defense Department. I want to thank you for cooperating in the capture of Mr. Almeida. As you may know, this city is run by the military. This city remains a vital instrument for determining our country's safety standards. So I ask you, forget what you witnessed here today.
General, beginning countdown, sir.
Aim!
On your mark. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark!
I told you to kill me. Now I'm going mad. I can't control this urge to kill. What are you gonna do about it? Damn. Get this over with once and for all.
Take cover! Hurry!
Such experimentation on those of African descent within America has been common since slavery, with a prime example that took place for decades being the Tuskegee syphilis study, in which 600 African American sharecroppers, 399 with latent syphilis, and 201 who were not infected, were enrolled in the study of the disease. Despite this, these men were never informed of the diagnosis, were given placebos, ineffective treatments, and the study lasted for 40 years, with the men never treated by penicillin despite it becoming the standard treatment in 1947. Obvious parallels can be made between this real-world event and Olmedo being the government's petri dish, with Olmedo's faith ultimately being controlled by the government, and similar to the assassination of Fred Hampton, once Olmedo is seen as an actual threat to the United States in terms of domestic terrorism, he is subsequently killed. Despite this physical death, similar to the nation of Japan, Olmedo's faith lives on through his disciples, similar to Saint Olmedo, who mirrors much of Olmedo's story all the way to her death, causing a healing spring of blood that heals that is similar to Clarence absorbing Olmedo's blood and carrying on his will, as Howell notes in his analysis. Furthermore, Clarence is a representation of how revolutionary ideals still exist after the death of revolutionaries, and how they will always be a threat to the empire at large, foreshadowing Japan's revenge at the end of the game.
What happened to Mr. Olmedo? Huh? This blood. It tastes like Mr. Olmeda's. So, he's dead, isn't he? I've always had a sixth sense. If I had only attained Mr. Olmeda's level earlier.
Clemens, you're in control of things now. Walk down the path of life. Don't succumb to weakness. Take the big risks.
Rest assured, Master Olmedo, I will watch over this town. Our way of life stands eternal. May peace rest with our great Olmedo, our Messiah.
The name's Andre Olmedo.
Encounter, the following chapter, is perhaps the darkest out of the entire game, with Curtis Blackburn being the most reprehensible villain in the game. His business of organ trafficking, pedophilia, sexual violence, and murder is something even the killer7, as hardened assassins, are disgusted by. Yet, as the chapter goes on to note, none of these things are the reason why Blackburn is targeted, and it isn't even the reason Dan Smith, Blackburn's former protege, wants him dead. All of these heinous crimes were allowed to exist because Blackburn, like Japan and Almeida, were assets to the United States, and only when their uses were expunged were they then disposed of. In Blackburn's case, as the tie-in handbook Hand and killer7 notes, Blackburn was actually using the Immigration Bureau to traffic organs, eventually using them to help the development of Heaven Smiles. It can be assumed that this act of betrayal is the actual reason why the United States cuts ties with Blackburn and orders him to be killed. Of course, immensely obvious parallels become clear between Blackburn's affiliation with government officials, the dehumanization of immigrants, and the abuse and subjugation of children both in terms of violence and sexual depravity within modern culture, with the most notable case being Jeffrey Epstein, known child sex offender and elite that has been a part of the cultural zeitgeist ever since his apparent suicide, with numerous links between him and political elites as well as celebrities. Epstein's connections to said elites paint a clear picture of how such monstrosities aren't just allowed to happen, but are even participated in by the elites of society, with Blackburn's monstrosities being a clear picture of this. As Travis notes in a monologue during the chapter, quote, the sexual violence that Blackburn commits against these immigrants is also represented brutally in Ayami Blackburn, a young girl he groomed into being an assassin that the killer7 are forced to kill during the mission to dispatch of Blackburn. And such abuse has also been documented. As a report from 2024 notes from Bobby Jean Mishkin, a survey revealed that nearly 40% of those in immigration detention camps had been sexually or physically assaulted while in detention, with officials refusing to respond to requests for comment. The ACLU also reported similar data, noting that, quote, according to government documents obtained by the American Civil Liberties Union through the Freedom of Information Act, nearly 200 allegations of abuse from detainees in detention facilities across the nation have been fielded by government officials since 2007 alone, end quote. As the research also notes, these facilities are also excluded from the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA for short, making it glaringly clear that the lives of immigrants within these centers are subject to those in charge, adding to the continued dehumanization rampant within the immigration system. This dehumanization is enforced within the narrative further by Dan's admittance that what Blackburn is doing is no different than what immigration is doing, showing how the killer7 aren't bastions of morality, but rather tools of the government. Whatever objections they had to the powers that be are in opinion only, as they will still enact those commands regardless.
Looks like this is your end.
Oh, guess you think this is pretty funny.
You got quite a hobby here, old man.
Doesn't hurt to have a hobby after retirement. What do you think?
What do I think? I think what you got here is no different than what those guys do at immigration.
All I ever wanted was to shed light on my life.
You have no idea. You're nothing but a sick maniac.
Guess it's time to close the curtains.
Trying to die in style? Give me a break, you sick old man.
Wonderful indeed.
Please leave your message after the tone.
Hello, Mr. Smith. The election is drawing near. Have you decided on your vote? If you haven't, please let the Republic Party make the most of your precious vote. Thank you and have a nice day.
Oh, that felt good. Talk about relieving stress. Hey, you! What are you staring at? Oh, I get it. You want to take a look, right? Does it turn you on? Does it? Hey, will you stop staring? Jeez, what a pervert.
We are the Punishing Rangers, the Handsome Men!
Reporting live to you now. The reports are just coming in. Steve Thunderson of the Democratic Party has been assassinated during today's Congress session. The assassins appeared to be wearing costumes resembling the comic book characters, the Handsome Men. Oh, jeez.
On paper, Alter Ego is the filler chapter of the game, solely focused on being a breather for the heavy political focus of the narrative to focus on a more meta-narrative point on the death of the author, while admittedly pulling in Shooter's Japanese cultural influences such as Super Sentai with the Handsome Men and anime cutscenes. Trevor Pearl Harbor loses control over his own creation and it kills him, with said creation garnering a meaning of its own, symbolic of losing control of a work of art and said work of art reflecting something entirely different. It's that narrative, however, with the socio-political themes of Alter Ego connect with the themes of the game the heaviest. The Handsome Men are a group of superheroes that clearly mimic the Super Sentai of real-world Japan, which in turn was the basis for the Western adaptation known as Power Rangers. This creation links back to the earlier point in the video made about how Japanese culture has influenced American culture, arguably becoming a dominant driving force within the culture of the United States. Of course, with Japan destroyed in the world of killer7, the Handsome Men feel like a parody of that culture, with their initial purpose of fighting Heaven Smile being possibly interpreted as the United States taking symbolism of different cultures and fashioning them for their own geopolitical and socio-political gain. In the case of the Handsome Men, Con Smith, the youngest of the killer7, being a fan of the group, makes a notable part of their goal clear: propaganda and indoctrination. Cartoons and politics have always been a notable focus of culture, similar to how art has always been reflective of the politics surrounding its creation. Though many modern opinions argue that they should be kept out, going back to classics such as the Looney Tunes reveals much of the political messaging present, such as Bugs Bunny in blackface, encouraging people to buy war bonds, or the caricatures of indigenous people. These being the primary form of entertainment for children shows a purposeful goal in building up racism and white supremacy within the youth. And while these depictions have decreased, what hasn't is the representation of the United States political adversaries. Nerd culture is most notable for this, as not only is it targeted towards the youth, but much of it, in the wake of 9/11, began to mirror the political focus of television and film. As Tanner Mirlish and Taha Ebay note in their criticisms of war games in the wake of the War on Terror, quote, "Many popular digital war games released by the US's globalizing digital game industry between 2001 and 2012 put players in the boots of mostly white male Anglo-American soldiers and empower them to virtually invade, occupy, and intervene in Muslim countries to kill Muslim enemies. Sometimes to save Muslim women and children, but most of the time to secure America in the West." End quote. Such a link between this Islamophobia and Japanese relations can also be connected with the racist caricatures of the Japanese during World War II.
It's Dan Smith, my man!
Yo, how's it going with next week's story, huh?
Whoa, this is unbelievable. You really came? I didn't think I had such power.
You're one lucky guy, you know that? Let me ask you, what happens to your prophecy if I shoot you right now?
Oh, I already wrote it. I wrote the story, so you'll die. Hey, it's almost time for their appearance. The appearance of heroes! You better watch out. These handsome men are tough. Trust me, I know, 'cause I wrote them. Kill Dan! Give him the old handsome wink stuff!
Handsome wink! Handsome baby! Get down! I suggest you don't get too involved. Unless, of course, you want to end up like this fellow here.
You think you guys can kill me?
I didn't know Killer7 had a sense of humor. It's showdown, Dan Smith. Handsome wink!
You'll pay for Black's death, bloody psychopaths, Killer7. Prepare to die. We are the Punishing Rangers! The Handsome Men!
Sorry, but your stupid series ends today. I'll finish you all at once if that's more convenient.
Fine! Let's settle this once and for all. 7 versus 7, fair and square. The place will be Broadway, New York, at 0400. Wait! I'm not finished with you yet!
Talk about characters out of a comic book.
They're coming! Wow! It's the Handsome Men! Awesome! Handsome Red! Handsome Blue! Handsome Light Brown! Handsome Red! Handsome Purple! Handsome White Pearl! Handsome Gold! We are the Punishing Rangers! The Handsome Men! They're really here! Did you see that? A real handsome pose!
Hope you guys are ready.
I must say, to decide where you will die is a gallant act.
Fitting for the killer7, don't you think?
I think that's enough chit-chat. Shall we begin?
Why not? I've got the ultimate cards matched up.
Let's get it on!
This all links back to the Handsome Men, a symbolic representation of how Western imperialism, similar to terrorism, has adapted in the modern age, using nerd culture and children's cartoons to instill aspects of the United States' beliefs onto the younger generation. Like Japan, Almeida, and Blackburn, once Pearl Harbor has outlived his usefulness, his assassination is orchestrated, with Love Wilcox, Handsome Pink, revealing that his death was also a part of an attempt to buy out the rights of the Handsome Men, a stark representation of American assimilation. All of this, however, as the chapter ends, is revealed to yet again be another point of the proxy fight between Cloudman and Harmon, leading to the finale of the game.
Please leave your message after the tone.
Hello, Mr. Smith. The election is drawing near. Have you decided on your vote? If you haven't, please let the Republic Party make the most of your precious vote. Thank you and have a nice day.
Check.
What a coincidence. Check.
This time, the game is mine. Do you want to hear a story, Harmon?
Why not?
There once was a young man who had a promising future.
The center-back position was his to keep, and no one could take that away from him. Any play was a fair play. No one blew the whistle on him. Everybody loved him. Not to mention his campus sweetheart. Ooh, she was something. They were the perfect couple. He graduated from Columbia with an MBA. His opportunity was infinite. He could do whatever he wanted with his life. But was he satisfied? No. Every night he would cry, begging the Lord. Something deep within needed awakening. Then one day it happened. That moment when the subconscious rises to the surface. Well, the way it triggered was very simple. It happened when his mother came onto him one night. As if the spirit of Jack the Ripper had taken over his body, he stabbed and stabbed until you couldn't tell who she was. You know what I think? An angel whispered into his ear. The angel gave him the extra courage he needed to give her the divine retribution she deserved.
Sure she wasn't the Hell's Angel?
I'm pretty sure she only had good intentions.
You really are a villain.
I had nothing to do with it, but I must admit, my memory has become a bit misty these days.
Smile serves as the finale and brings all of these themes mentioned to their absolute forefront by focusing on the main protagonist of the game, Garcian Smith, and his manipulation from both the East in Cloudman and the West in Harmon. As an African American, Garcian is notable because geographically, Africa is situated directly between the East and West, with it being the country that to this day is arguably the most exploited by capitalism and imperialism in the world. Such exploitation was noted by Oliver Whelan while discussing neocolonialism that threatens the sovereignty of African nations, noting that, quote, countries like Russia and China have created a new scramble for Africa, a circumstance that reflects the situation in Africa after the Berlin Conference of 1884, which partitioned the African continent between European powers. Ever since, African history has been filled with foreign interference and exploitation, end quote. Whelan goes on to describe how, although Chinese relations are far better than their Western counterparts, with China focusing on creating a framework to promote international trade and cooperation, quote, the immediate consequence is that it creates a dependency system similar to that of colonial rule. African nations and companies would only be able to trade along China's infrastructure, and thus would entirely be subject to Chinese regulations, laws, and influence. Should the African economy ever increase to a pace where it becomes reliant on commerce, the BRI would have an entire continent's economy in its control, and therefore its government and people. Even further, African economies haven't industrialized yet, and therefore another dependency would emerge on China, this time on manufactured goods. Once factory goods from China are introduced into African economies, China would gain another foothold in the continent's economy that it could use to leverage against it, end quote. Furthermore, in 2018, it was revealed that China had actually bugged the headquarters of the African Union, which they funded. Japan's own relationship with Africans isn't too different, with the first contact between Africans and the Japanese being the result of the Portuguese and Dutch traveling with slaves to the country. As David Wright notes in his analysis of the dichotomy, quote, the frequent presentation of African slaves by the Portuguese to the Japanese court would have understandably left negative impressions about blacks in the minds of the Japanese. Considering these circumstances, black Africans and other darker peoples went from being at times revered to being endured and finally despised. By the time of the Meiji Restoration in 1868, negative attitude towards blacks and darker non-Western peoples began to proliferate in Japan, end quote. Perhaps the most famous representation of black people in Japan is Yasuke, a slave who ended up serving Oda Nobunaga as a vassal and retainer, with some even considering him a samurai. These relationships are noted because they serve as the basis of Garcian's life, or rather, Amir Parkliner, Garcian's true name. Being exploited into becoming a killer that was manipulated by both American and Japanese interests, Amir is the personification of imperialist exploitation of minorities, predominantly black people. Even when Garcian, the narrative points out how every aspect of his life is monitored and controlled, and his referral to Harmon as master, even losing direction when Harmon's personality disappears, add to the dichotomy, control, and manipulation by the powers that be. Such manipulation of the psyche by the US government has also been exposed, such as MK Ultra. And with the aforementioned experimentation on African Americans, Amir's life is a tragic representation of control by both sides.
Naturally, I found myself being led to this place.
Long journey, but it ends here, Garcian. Now, I think it's time I called you by your real name, Amir Parkliner.
Amir?
Allow me to introduce myself. My name's Harmon Smith. I'm the man you saw in your past. Do you remember the incident where 6 people were murdered in this hotel? You must have seen it yourself. Because you were the killer. The assassin, Amir Parkliner, was the ace of aces. Who would have thought the killer was a mere 13-year-old? It was a deliberate crime targeted toward the Smith Alliance. It consisted of 7 members, but the leader wasn't included in the 7. Later investigations found his dead body inside a safe of a school. The investigative unit called them the Killer-7. But the whole affair was never made public, not because this was an aberration from society, but because it involved national security issues. Unfortunately, a curse brought upon you by old traditions. You, Amir, are an assassin controlled by the government. Someone is watching your every move. From the second when I first took you in on the roof. You were one of the very few assassins with class, but you were out of control. Still, there was something venerable about you. Then it occurred to me, you were no longer a mortal being. Within you, ever so quietly, evil had opened its eyes.
That level of control and manipulation is also revealed within the world at large, as Coburn Elementary School, the school Amir is enrolled in, is revealed to be behind the presidential elections within the country. Again, linking back to the elements of control, manipulation, and corruption that is a part of every aspect of the government within the world of Killer-7. It has been documented for years that election choices and education have always been intricately intertwined, with CNN describing in their polls of the 2020 elections that voters with a college degree accounted for 41% of the electorate, and they supported President Joe Biden 55% to Trump's 43%. Trump got the support of about 2/3 of white voters without a college degree, but he lost white college-educated voters. The result of such impact from education levels is part of the reason why conservatives have taken such a focus on changing the education system and determining the doctrines of learning, as well as certain conservative outlets targeting college campuses. Killer-7 takes this notion to its eventual conclusion, with the elites manipulating education from the elementary level entirely, effectively cultivating their party's strength while undermining the democratic process entirely.
The press is gonna be all over this one. The United States cover will be blown.
So this is dirty politics.
The presidential election is in the hands of the Education Ministry. They manipulate the votes and bring forth political leaders.
Who's he?
Greg Nightmare. He was the chairman of Education Ministry.
What is United States? What is the purpose of the president?
I'm Japanese. How the hell should I know? Figure it out yourself. There are more important things. Shit. Like finding out who you are.
Like other aspects of the plot, however, the relationship between East and West complicates this process, with the revelation of Japan's involvement in Coburn Elementary as a training ground for infiltration being a clear connection to the feared Japanese Americans being possible sleeper agents of the Japanese government during World War II, with a clear reason for this within killer7 being retribution. The same retribution Matsukin and the women of Japan desire against the United States in the epilogue chapter Lion, as well as clear representation of the retribution terrorist groups from the Middle East were inspired by due to American imperialism and intervention in the region. Again, the fact that such resentment within the game is shown to be sustained over decades, and even for different reasons, adds to the cyclical nature of the world and the geopolitical conflicts the game is tackling. With this plot point, the game paints a picture of how much retribution against the United States has been building up, with the previous chapters detailing how and why that retribution has begun to occur.
No, it wasn't me. It can't be. It's all a misunderstanding.
Within Lion, that retribution comes to its inevitable conclusion, or rather appropriately, the lack of one. Amir, now in control of his own life, has to not only kill the last Heaven Smile, but also choose to either kill Matsukin, resulting in the US discovering the Japanese plan of retribution and completely eradicating the country, or allow him to live, resulting in Japan's retribution coming to fruition in a counterattack against the US. The entire game builds to this choice, and yet, the revelation that the final Heaven Smile is not only Iwajiru, the faithful servant of the killer7, but also is actually Cloudman in disguise, makes the post-credit scene of Harmon and Cloudman reenacting their fight from the beginning of the game in Shanghai 100 years later feel less like a shock and more like the realization of an inevitability. The choice never mattered. With this, Shooter 51 shows the utter futility of not only war, but also terrorism. It is not an immoral result of evil, but a response to centuries of imperialism and ultranationalism, resulting in endless conflict between the East and the West. Looking back at killer7, Shooter didn't just warn of a future, but instead provided a timeless revelation about terrorism and the socio-political conflicts that cause its existence. Every issue the game tackles is something modern society struggles with today because it was a struggle yesterday, and will continue to be a struggle tomorrow. As Cloudman puts it perfectly in his final words to Harmon, the world won't change. All it does is turn.
You're awake from your nightmare.
Harmon, the world won't change. All it does is turn. Now, let's dance.
Once again, I would like to say thank you to everyone for watching and sharing this video. Comments are always appreciated. Sorry for the long wait between videos. There was a lot going on in my personal life, a lot of stuff going on in the actual real world, but I plan to get back on the videos. I already have footage recorded for the next videos I'm making, so hopefully, if nothing crazy happens, I can come out with more videos, more analytical pieces, hopefully more pieces that aren't just for my articles, predominantly video first, which would be interesting for a change, but I think I'm a writer at heart, so who knows. But once again, like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe please, and see you guys next time. Thank you as always.